said something, but I think I should hold her responsible. When people keep asking how are things done in Rwanda or how do they happen, one of them is such a thing as Claire having imposed herself on my program and changed it and brought me to meet with the people I didn't have on the program, but I still accepted. So sometimes things happen not according to program. You just keep making choice of what you have to deal with every day. And so I hold you responsible for that, but nonetheless continue and have the meeting. I'm happy to meet you, and I was happy to be invited by the government here in Dubai and UAE to participate in something that is important, in my view. Let me contextualize it a bit as to why I think it is important. Central to the discussion is government, among other things. In a sense, the discussion is about whether we give relevance or not to government. I think government should have relevance, even when I'm aware that there is increasing skepticism across the world about politics and governments and so on and so forth. But I can also understand why people have this kind of skepticism. I think over time there has been erosion of trust. People across the world have different levels of trust for their leaders or for their government or for their politics. And from one place to another, there are different reasons, or in some cases similar reasons as to why that is the case. But whatever the situation is, I think there is no point in trying to think that government is or should be irrelevant. I think we need to probably examine and say what are really the roles of government and what has gone wrong with the politics or with the leaders and so on and so forth. And then from there, we put governments back to their effective or other important roles that they hold, which is really to, in my view, create this environment and feel responsible and responsive towards their people, and therefore environment where people freely continue to make their choices and do what is good for their own improvements or development. And like in the case of Rwanda, I think because of fate more than geography or because of history, government became important because it is what gave a starting point for a new Rwanda. We could not have waited for the private sector to do it or any other entity, but actually government came to being and then allowed these other important institutions to develop and, in actual fact, increasingly take over their main roles, whether it is the private sector or the academic institutions or civil society and so on and so forth. So government has tried to, over time, reduce on its role in everything, and has continued to keep surrendering or passing over to these institutions the responsibilities government has been involved in so much from the beginning, because we are starting from scratch. There was nothing, and we had to create something, which we are seeing today, putting in the right hands these responsibilities. And I want to talk about the private institutions, the private sector, and others are now actively playing their active role and their rightful roles in these responsibilities. So the management of that for any country, I think will define a lot about these countries, or will lead to what happens in these countries. Particularly, I'm talking about mine, and I'm more conversant with that. If politics fail, then most likely everything else fails. If politics is good, and good being that politics is to allow the right players to play their right roles, and create that stable environment in which that happens, then I think the chances of succeeding and making good progress and moving forward are very high. So that is the struggle that countries go through, people of any country go through. Mine, at least, we go through that every day, and we have put in place systems, institutions, mechanisms that keep taking a measurement of what we are doing and how we are doing it, and whether that is actually leading to the progress we want. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to have been a part of this conversation, even if for a short time. But I'm happy to extend the discussion with you here today. So on that note, you are free to ask anything you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the opportunity. Rwanda is small in size, but is strategic in location, and you've made economic progress and economic development your prime driver and objective. A lot of people talk about M-Pesa and mobile money in Kenya. In my opinion, and I hope you will agree, Rwanda is a prime and ready to be the best example for maybe mobile money and mobile payments to bring every Rwandan into more financial inclusivity. Is this an area that you are hopefully focusing on for the next period to bring the first true entire economy on a mobile product? And the other, how about Rwanda being an aviation hub in Central and Eastern Southern Africa?
Let me, first of all, add maybe something. To start with, I think small is good, makes it things easier to manage. That is the starting point. But we have also discovered that being small is not enough for an entity to be easily managed, because small as Rwanda is, can be origin of big problems that, spread to the rest of the world. Or in reverse, small in managing these big problems can be a source of big solutions that can address some problems of the world elsewhere. So there is this, I don't know if I may use contradiction in a sense, that at least we ourselves have learned in managing our situation where we are small, comes easier to manage our situation to some extent, but we have been origin of huge problems. If you look at a little bit, if you look back in our history, and in the same way, we have found that in managing these problems, we can also share some solutions that can address big problems elsewhere, whether it is in the process of reconciliation or, putting back a country whose social and economic fabric have been completely torn apart, and then make progress in socio-economic transformation as we have. Now, to the very point, Rwanda, in fact, has made good progress in financial inclusiveness. Financial inclusion has taken root. By way we have brought in the whole population, and based on policy, on practices and involvement of people, including women who form the majority of our population. 52% of our population are women, and there was more than imbalance in this area where women, much as they are the majority of our population, they had the least contribution or participation in what happens in the country. So we have had to reverse that. So financial inclusion is a target, and we use all these possible tools. First, from policy perspective, understanding that this is necessary and we have to do that. Secondly, the very tools you have in fact mentioned. We use mobile money from, which has M-Pesa, which has originated from Kenya and has spread across, Rwanda and the rest of the region and beyond. And there have been other innovations originating from Rwanda to make sure that these technologies and innovations serve the particular area of interest you have mentioned and other areas as well. For example, in Rwanda, there has been an innovation by the young people called the e-soko. Soko really means market. And now it is spreading across the people of Rwanda, the rural areas. The ordinary people are using that to access market information, to know how and when and where to market what they are producing, and vice versa. The other technologies that have been there serve, for example, the health sector. We have something called rapid SMS, which enables community health workers to monitor, say, what is going on with pregnant women across the country, and therefore monitor the health of pregnant women, later on when babies are born, and so on and so forth. So all these applications, all these innovations have been very helpful, not only in, say, financial sector and inclusion, but they have also using the this mobility, we have been able to reach every sector and people of our country. So we are very much interested in putting center to our development, technology, different technologies. That's why we have invested heavily in ICTs and fiber across the country, reaching every point, including rural areas, and building on that for different services as we continue to develop also e-government to make sure that actually these mobile technologies, especially in the area of payment, works very well. It is connecting that with the registration of land titles or different things.
Thank you, Mr. President. Being a regional leader in East Africa, I would very much be interested to hear your opinion of the leadership crisis in South Sudan and how it's affecting the insecurity in the region and possibly your hopes for that region. Thank you.
Well, I would have loved to hear from you. What do you think about your leaders in South Sudan? And of course, how that affects you. If I can understand it from a distance, I know you are right in the middle of it. It hits you directly more than anybody else since you are from there. But of course, when you look at the stories of South Sudan and what is going on, and then the leaders, being the ones focused on, and not the country, not the people, and focused on not for any good reasons, rather for all wrong reasons, really, because so it's an absurdity in a sense, in my personal view, how a new country like South Sudan, by the way, a very rich country, from the information I have, extremely wealthy in all senses. Of course, starting with the people, but then the natural resources and so on and so forth. So the only impediment being politics, again it comes politics, being the leaders. We have had a conflict going on for many years, and then you got a country, and there's everything. The world over, there was political will, goodwill for South Sudan, and I think the whole world was trying to do whatever they could do to support South Sudan rebuild itself. And in a very short time, everything came down crumbling. And then when people asking what happened, all they have to do is look at leaders and say, what happened, especially the two leaders. It's President Salva Kiir, then there is Riek Machar, and all those below them, and everybody else. This is what happened. Of course, you start from there because no one imagines that people from any other part of the world can come and sort out the problems of South Sudan. They can help, but it's, after all, like for any country, the people of South Sudan that really have got to confront whatever challenges and deal with their problems. So, before I even talk about the problems affecting the region from South Sudan and so on and so forth, I really have to think about the South Sudanese themselves, what they are going through, and can't be anywhere near. I mean, the region can't be as much affected as South Sudan itself and the people of South Sudan. So I have no a ready-made solution for South Sudan. I can only say it mirrors the situation Rwanda went through at some point. But we are happy to have left that behind us and moving forward. But we feel sorry for South Sudan. South Sudan needs to find some way, and then the rest of the world can associate with them in support of what they think is their way forward.
Hi, President. I have two questions for you. One, I guess, is more of a reflection on your years as a leader of Rwanda.
Sorry?
The first one is a reflection on your years as a president of Rwanda. So I'm sure you came to presidency with a plan to take Rwanda at a better place, basically, both politically and economically, and you've delivered on both. But I'm sure there are things that didn't go according to plan, either positively or negatively. So I was wondering how you handled that over those years. The second question is on something you said just right now, basically. You said good politics is about making sure that the right person do the right thing at the right moment, I guess. And you said also something about transferring things to the private sectors, making sure they continue the work of the public sectors. We are taught that usually governments are pretty bad at picking up the right private sector players. So I was wondering how you did that in Rwanda. Thanks.
Maybe let me answer it in a reverse process. In fact, it wasn't picking the right players in the private sector or something like that. What we did was to encourage that development to happen, even without having to pick. But I'll tell you quickly something we did maybe that is unusual. Like, for example, in mid 1990s, it's a bit, I'm sure for people in other parts of the world, they may find it not usual. For example, in 1995, the ruling party in Rwanda that I lead, initiated having, it was 1997, initiated having the first mobile telephone company come to Rwanda. We didn't have any. In fact, there wasn't, I remember later on from there, the company, when it was MTN, South African company, when it came to Rwanda, later on they asked people in Rwanda to connect them with Uganda, our neighbor to the north. But it wasn't the private sector that initiated that, it was actually government, and through the ruling party. And then MTN was hesitant, they weren't sure, so the party encouraged MTN and said, we are going to share the risk. We will take 50%, I think 51%, and you take 49%, and you take the management. And the whole idea was to get started. If we had left it entirely to the private sector, maybe we would still be waiting. So and it started, and it has done tremendously well. And so the party eventually actually pulled out, divested from the company, and left it to the private sector. So it was a case of stimulating this to take place. And there have been many other things like that. So that we start something, then attract the private sector to say, you know, this is working. This is what happened with the first good hotel that was built in Rwanda, in Kigali. There are now many, but the first one happened like that as well. And Government pulled out. So we were trying to, stimulate the shy private sector to really take their role. And we were not particular about choosing who and which one. Whoever was ready to invest and was seeing an opportunity, we allowed them to do that and then pass that on to happen. So this is the best way we thought we would do. This is why I said at first we found government almost having to do everything. And of course, this is where now size is a disadvantage. Rwanda being a small country, a small market, there wasn't this sense of urgency for anybody to rush in and invest. They wanted to stay away. So that's why we had to do something unusual to try and bring people to come and invest. So this was, they would have rushed to other countries with problems, or coming from problems, but not Rwanda. So we had to deal with it specifically like that. So reality is to create investment climate that is conducive, is to try and incentivize and sometimes take risks with the people, and then so government does that, takes the first step, and then pushes it to the private sector. We've done that and quite successfully. In fact, something to do with something you mentioned, which I probably didn't talk to, about aviation. The same thing. We have created Rwanda Air, an aviation company, an airline, because we didn't have anybody to start it. We've invested in it. It's growing. It's working very well. It's in fact a demonstration that the government can also run something efficiently. It's actually working very well, and we are looking for people to take it over and run with it when they want. But if we had waited for people to come and set up an airline for us, they would not have done it. And then with the ambition of being an aviation hub, we couldn't or could not reach that. Hopefully we'll reach that in the future in the region, but there is a long way to go. So then quickly to the second part, we come from a part of the world where we don't want to focus so much on the past, but rather on the future. If we were to focus so much on the past, I think we would be caught up in a dilemma or to keep sorting out past problems rather than the present. So far, the progress being made tells me that we are on a good track. I think one would concentrate on that and see how we keep going forward. And I don't want to be in a situation where I have to lament about my failures or my mistakes of the past. I rather save my energy for what is coming ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's very similar to the UAE, actually. We have, in terms of doing business, the share between the citizen and the foreigner when they come to the UAE and conduct business, and also with the aviation, focus on aviation. We have Emirates Airlines, which proved that has been a successful sector for the UAE. So we can see lots of similarity between the UAE and Rwanda in these terms. So thank you we're learning a lot here. And there are actually people on this side of the room. I don't want them to get upset because many of them raised their hands and I couldn't see them. So.
I try to shorten my answer. Sometimes I get carried away and keep talking. So
yes, at the back, the business school now.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the topic of private sector interaction, specifically with regards to education, we've seen in a lot of East Africa, there's been a great deal of private organizations coming in and starting schools. Often they're foreign-owned or foreign-run. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that is potentially problematic going forward? Do you think that's playing a good role? How do you see that as evolving? And do you look to have any sort of policy interventions on that going forward?
Potentially it can be problematic. But that will depend on, and this is going to be the case almost on many other things. We want investors, we want people to come and invest in all kinds of sectors and so on, but you must also be, we need to lay out clear rules of engagement, if you will. What do we want from an investor in the area of education? And what education, therefore, do we actually want so that an investor fits in? If somebody comes and invests in the country or in that particular sector of education and so on from outside, it doesn't matter wherever they are from, but they must find something that guides them as to what you really want. You want good education, you want quality, you want... So what are the rules? What is it that is there that you really want that somebody should fit in? If they come and are able to do whatever they want, so long as it gives them money, well, there will be certainly some problems. But I don't think the problems will have come more from the foreign investor in this area. It will have come from the chaos they found on the ground. People not telling them what they really expect and what they want, so that somebody fits there, or against which you hold them accountable and say, you didn't do the right thing in education because we told you, we expected this, and this is what you should do. So you came and did a wrong thing or a different thing from what we agreed and so on. So I think, and this is going to be the case in every sector. I think the countries that want foreign investments or whatever from outside need to put in place a framework that is very clear, that guides people, and people should know what to expect.
Since we already spoke about aviation, I have a question regarding drones and how Rwanda is leading, especially in policy areas, and I'm really interested in that. I was happy to learn here that you are cooperating with my former alma mater, EPFL of Switzerland, and especially looking in countries like United States and how they are preventing companies of using drones. And then looking to non-state actors like drug cartels and how they are adapting technology and using drones to transport their goods. What are your priorities, and especially the national regulatory framework of cargo drones? And where do you see Rwanda in the next 10, 15 years here?
Yes, we've got started. I think the group you are talking about, I know Jonathan, who is spearheading that in Rwanda, and is helping the country to build a center of excellence in dealing with this and managing it. But there's another company we are dealing with that is already actually is about to start operation, Zipline, from the United States. And what they are doing is to work with them. They are trying to start delivering, for example, medical products to rural areas, remote places, which has huge benefits. For example, they collect blood samples from different clinics, hospitals up country, and bring them quickly to areas where this can be managed, or the reverse, they carry different products as well back to these places. It saves time, it saves money, and also saves, for example, these samples they are carrying. If they wait too long, or they are going on these dirt roads and so on, maybe things change about them. So it's very quick. That is going to happen. So we see scaling up of that in the next 10 years, so that it's almost to be taken for granted that things are happening that way. But of course, again, like I said, the previous question, we need to really understand. We know we can see the benefits, but we understand how do we manage this vis-a-vis other risks associated with this, especially for aviation generally and so on and so forth. So this is what people are concentrating on to study and then therefore be able to establish rules and framework in which this is to play out without drones being a danger to people's safety and other things.
Hara, I think you had a question.
Thanks, Mr. President, for having us here. I want to build on what you just said to Ihab about the national reconciliation. I come from Iraq, and you know Iraq suffered years of sanctions and war and instability. So coming to an office with such inheritance, what would be your first priorities?
Well, coming to office in that situation, I'm sure if it were you and for me, as it happened in Rwanda, first of all, you understand the problem. You come understanding the problem. You have to, as the person from Iraq, I'm sure you are saying, what are these problems we have? Historical, cultural, social, all kinds of things. And therefore, you coming out of such a situation, you want to address the real problems you think are the ones that either led to that or can continue into the future and address them. People having grievances that you need to address, and are they real, are they legitimate, or you find a formula of addressing that, but through institutions you need to put in place, and then systems to deliver whatever you have formulated as solutions. It's easy to talk about and argue it. It becomes a different thing for the practice that actually gives the results. So which means I would want to leave that to you. But I can share with you what we did in our case. It was to say our society has suffered these problems of the past and historical, cultural, all kinds of prejudices and so on, whether they are internal or external. Then you lay out a formula of how you're going to move addressing that, but you start with the people, your own people in the country, and create an environment where a discussion, a conversation can take place and get to understand each other. You know what you don't agree on, you know what you agree on, you go on with what you agree on and keep resolving those you don't agree on over time. But making sure that there is this stable environment. You need security, you need legitimacy to operate and then deliver on all these issues.
We'll go to the other side of the room. I can see Aisha. Aisha, she was raising her hand. Do you have a mic? Can you pass it?
But one remark on that, just to be sure of one thing. Nobody ever from outside will deliver a solution to you. If there's anybody who says that, you just know they are not being truthful. What we have done that has also worked for us is, you see, starting from a point where we are really hard pressed to deal with so many complex issues, so on. We have had to think, out of the box, and think hard and see what will deliver for us. And knowing, for example, that people have to be involved, and it's all people that have to be involved if you want to maximize the benefits. And then 52% of our population, as I said, are women. And by the way, women involved, for example, in the agriculture, which has been the mainstay of our economy and population. They are the majority there. And we just, from a logical point of view, we say, do you really leave 52% of your population out of any activity and you think you are doing something sensible? That's one point. The second is, it's an issue even of rights. I think these women have rights, which we shouldn't continue to think we can deny them. And even if we were able to do that, it's just not right. and anyway, at some point it has a consequence, one way or the other, if it continues like that. And again, these people we are talking about are our own mothers, sisters, daughters. It's not like we are talking about to alien people who are new to our society. So deeply anchored in this, we really thought of how do we involve women, how do we, so it starts with their health, then education, and skills, and loosening on the some of even unwritten regulations or restrictions, some of which where you would trace as being cultural in some instances, in some societies, and opening up a little bit, and as fast as that can happen. So in our case, it happened very fast because we didn't have anything to wait for. In fact, it seems the population was ready and we were in agreement that should be the case. And with education especially, and the health of women working, the rest has been happening very, very fast. And then encouraged women to play part in decision-making processes. For example, in electoral processes, we have encouraged women who normally, because of the history, would not bother to go to stand as members of parliament or for mayors or for this. They would just leave it to men. And then we started, with these other investments, we started telling people, no, you go, And whenever they would go, they find they are elected, they are mayors, they are MPs, they later on, if it is positions of appointments, they are appointed to positions of responsibility. So it was encouraging them to, first of all, to really show up, present themselves, so that it is not just handing to them like you are handing to them some gift or anything. It's theirs, it's their own. So, and it has really worked in our case. And I think it worked because society seemed to be ready and understanding this as well. So I think this is what we have done and has worked. And I think the others can do the same or even better. But they have to make the choice to do that. Each society, each country makes its own choices based on whatever they want.
So we should expect President Blair after President Kagame.
Sorry?
We should expect President Blair after President Kagame.
Or you should maybe expect a woman president. It could be another name. but Claire is not excluded. Well, I'm told that's not how democracy works.
Indeed, we're very impressed with the work that women are doing in Rwanda. We met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda, and Claire is a great example of role model of Rwandan women. I can see some more hands if
Sure.
you're fine with the we
I
know you
decided
have
to have
business.
enough time for you.
Thank
If
you
you
very
have the time, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We appreciate it. Yes, please. Go ahead. Yes, you have a mic.
Mr. President, every year all African countries and China hold jointly summit conference every year. At the same time, in decades, China consistently increases its concentration on Africa. You see, China faces a slowdown in its economy, only 6.9% in 2015, the lowest in 16 years. So based on your successful experience for transformation for your country, what should you suggest to China's leadership? Could African be the bigger opportunity for China, especially could the African countries be big opportunity for China? So especially the rollout of its high-profile one load, one belt strategy. One load, one belt.
One, sorry?
It's overseas expansion. It's
Expression, yeah.
yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, first of all, I don't rule out China continuing to grow and supporting growth in other parts of the world in foreseeable future. I think that will happen. China will have some slowdowns or different things, but overall they will continue to perform well given even the base they have created and strengthened. But having said that, you have a point in a sense of there is this cooperation between China and Africa specifically. Even recently there was a meeting of heads of state from Africa in South Africa with the Chinese leadership. They are discussing this issue of investments, with China investing more in Africa and Africa. So, but this means that really the burden to an extent also is on the side of Africa. When there is a relationship that is, even if it is very beneficial, you need to find ways of sustainability of that. How do you sustain it? And how do you make sure that you really don't depend on one thing or another? I guess Africa will have to sort out a few things to make sure that we don't, for example, depend on shipping raw materials, wealth to China or to other places, but also start adding as much value as we can on our continent. And we can now benefit from the Chinese money and know-how to actually maybe shift some of these industries, some of which are facing problems in Africa, in China, to Africa, as it is happening already in some cases. We are seeing some industries shifting. We have some going to Ethiopia, we have others coming to Rwanda, we have seen others relocate to West Africa, others to Southern Africa. This is something that should be encouraged because it's providing jobs, it is enabling Africans to add value to things that were otherwise exported raw and so on. So I think China, I don't discount, I don't rule out that China will continue to grow and push other areas to grow in cooperation. but we on the side of Africa, we need to do better and do more in the way of benefiting from this relationship.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think I saw hands there at the back. Yeah. Tommy, and then you. Okay.
Mr. President, I'm from South Africa, and I think our countries, to a very large extent, had parallel histories, certainly around the mid-1990s. And I also do think that if at that time you had asked many people to look ahead into 20 years and make a prediction which of the two countries would be characterized by reconciliation or social and political violence and conflict, you know, at least 99% of the people would have gotten the answer wrong. And I think that speaks very much to the work that you've done in Rwanda in building the nation. And for that, I wish to congratulate you, and also to congratulate you on the role that you've played in bringing about social and political stability to the wider continent of Africa. And that's certainly something that many of us, myself particularly, look up to you for. So mine's not really a question, but just to say, you know, I wish to thank you very much for that role that you've played. And also to say, as a South African, you know, we have a lot of work that we still need to do, certainly around social cohesion and nation building. And if at all, at some point in the future, you run an apprenticeship on the work of building nations, I'd like to sign up for that. And that's more an invitation, rather.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the question, though, that I do have is looking around at the support staff that you have. I'm just wondering, are there any people over the age of 40, or when you're in your late 30s, you have to start worrying when you work in Rwanda about retirement?
One sure thing, most, if not all of them, are younger than me, so below my age. I haven't had many who are above my age. So, and this is why I said one time when people were asking me about my successor, I just simply said, I wish that one to be a woman and younger than me, not my age. So I hope we shall come to that point maybe at the right time when we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, okay, go ahead. And then maybe Katra, and then we can wrap up, I think, because, yeah.
Mr. President, so you're a man with a vision, and to execute the vision, you need many people. I was wondering, I would love to hear from you about times where you had trouble finding people with the right competence to fill in the posts that Rwanda needed to grow. And in those cases, what did you actually do to remedy that?
That's a very important, very good question. In fact, that was very much the case for us from 94 up to really 2005. I should give that period, make it that of a lot of difficulties in that particular area. We did a number of things. One, we went, like before, during the liberation struggle, a number of people participated from outside, people who were scattered all over the world in exile as refugees and so on and so forth. And they grew up there, they studied there, they did different things there. So we really mobilized them, those who could make it, to come back home and do what was needed to do. And we had very good response. People wanted to come back, wanted to participate, and they did. Second, we also trained people, tried to train people very quickly. In fact, I'm reminded by the South African lady there who during that time, at some point we had a good arrangement with South Africa where they took in mass a number of young people to go and train them. And they did it, they trained our people like they were training South Africans. It wasn't very expensive. So that was one way. We did that with South Africa and with India and continue to up to now. Then later on, we did something else. We actually removed the visas, work permits, and so on for people in the region, and encouraged people in the region to, whenever they find it fitting for them, to come and work in Rwanda and do things. And there was good response again. Normally this kind of thing creates problems, but we have tried to manage that, and it's about, again, involving people and having a conversation with them, because normally when you allow people to come in and work from everywhere, then the citizens start complaining, say, oh, you know, you're calling people to come and take our jobs, and so we actually showed them that, no, there were jobs for them and for those others who are coming, and those we are inviting are people with skills, some of which were already lacking in the country, obviously. So we took advantage of that. In fact, over time, they have seen that people who have come and have skills and so on, who have jobs now from outside, have not necessarily taken over anybody's job. The one who comes from outside just fills the gap that is there. So we did this number of things in a combination to you know, be able to take off. We didn't have to wait until we have trained all our people, the ones with the number we want and so on. That would be holding back the process of development. So we tried to do all that, and so far so good. We need more people anyway, even up to now. The demand for skills is very high in Rwanda, so we are still, it's a work in progress.
Katra, I think it will be the last question.
Thank you, Excellency. I wanted to kindly ask about your thoughts on the feasibility of a common currency and a political federation.
Well, quickly, there are 4 stages we want to pursue in East Africa. One has been customs union, which we have created and is working. The common market, monetary union, and political federation, meaning really this would be a state where East Africa, 5 countries would be working almost as one country. Obviously, we have made more progress with 1 or 2 and still slow on the others. The most complicated ones are the monetary union and the political federation. There are always different understandings from partner states, but we keep working on it. So I think for the first 2, the common market and the customs union, this has been working very well. In fact, when things come from outside, when they have entered East Africa, it's like you're in one country, and that has helped business and other things to move as fast as possible.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, do we still have time now? Are we on time? Maybe one more? Yes, okay, we will run. Okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I sincerely want to appreciate the fact that you came here, because I was beginning to feel like an orphan, especially with the happenings around us at the summit, where Africa is seen like the continent that is contributing less or participating less in advancing the vision of the world governments and economies. And I think you've been doing a great job in Rwanda. You've created the rule of law. You've solidified and established the institutions that are there. The country is up and operating fully. It's functioning well. Detractors will always be, but I think Rwanda is on the right path. And Rwanda has given Africa something to sell in the world market. That is why you're here. My worry, however, is the fact that Africa is talking a lot about economic growth, but we want to see transformation. Rwanda is on the right path with this economic transformation, but how sustainable it is, especially when we know that the natural resources that Africa is always proud of having, claiming to be rich based on these natural resources, is gradually giving way in the world market. The recent drop in the prices of petrol attests to that fact, because there are alternative sources of energy and other needs that are coming up. So what's your perspective on that?
Sure. Maybe we have a second, I answer both of them.
Hello, Mr. President. Mine is going to be a little bit selfish question, I guess. I came in trying to understand more about your framework of leadership and how you brought back the country on reconciliation. And I think I got a lot of that when you answered to Hala's question. I'm from Kosovo, where communities were also torn apart by violence. But I was impressed by the thing when you said that we focus on the future and we don't try to focus on the past. And I think that's the best way to move forward. And as we try that in Kosovo, yet again the past clinches on us and does not let go very far away. And one of that is that we don't get a lot of international support as we should. We do face troubles in recognitions, and we do face a lot of recognition problems in Africa as well. And you being sort of our hero as well in Kosovo of how you brought the communities together, will we see it in our lifetime that Rwanda recognizes Kosovo?
Okay, on the first one, you see, while there is example and right statement, that actually countries can also develop not necessarily depending on these commodities and the high prices they have been at and benefiting from that, meaning the case of Rwanda. We have registered growth in Rwanda, I would say between 7 and 8% every year for the last now 14 years, right? And we don't produce oil. We don't, so it's a modest thing that is happening. So it means there are other things outside oil and commodities that can actually, yeah, and that builds on people, on education, skills, on the governance of, of systems to deliver, all of these things. And then, of course, the usual thing we talk about and do not so much about, which would benefit Africa, and that is trade among African countries. Intra-African trade is at between 10 and 12%, while North America, the region, is about 40%. Europe is 62-3%. So the question is, why? What is the problem? Why are we not doing much of that ourselves in Africa when we can actually benefit immensely from that? And this is what we see is happening increasingly in East African region, for example, we started with. We are making sure now we can see volume of trade within East African countries in the region going up every time and benefiting definitely the economies of our region. And we are not trading in these commodities. So, and the other thing is, maybe we need to start adding value to things we really produce, and not just. So these problems that are there, that Africa is facing, I think they come with a silver lining in a sense. There are things around that we can benefit from if we just changed and did things differently, or did some of the things we are not doing, or more of the things we are doing but not enough. So I think it shouldn't be a kind of situation of hopelessness, where people will say, there is doom coming. No, I think people need to confront it the way it is, and just seek from ourselves what really needs to be done, and we are capable of, and move on with that. So I think it's not a lost cause for Africa at all. It's just adjustments of in doing things differently, and we will be where we want to be. And of course, Africa working together more than ever before, we can be there. I think that is it. Then for Kosovo, I hear you. I hear what you are saying, and everybody tries to follow what goes on in that part of the world. But what I can assure you is, don't despair too much about the rest of the world not paying too much attention. I think sometimes too much attention actually comes with the problems. So I'm just speaking from my own experience. And maybe you can also take heart in that while that is desirable that people pay attention and actually give Kosovo what Kosovo wants, that the rest of the world may hold in their hands. I think in Kosovo, because of that problem we are facing, you may also find solace in concentrating on those things you can do for yourselves in the meantime, as you wait for, this world we live in is not black and white. There are always these gray areas, and they tend to dominate things. So I'm sure the cause of Kosovo gets lost in this murky diplomatic world we have to deal with. And that may affect Kosovo in one way and affect Rwanda in a different way, even if it is from Kosovo. Meaning the politics and diplomacy around these things, recognition and when, how, Kosovo has the whole world, much as you are saying, not paying attention, actually paying attention, but dealing with that in a way that doesn't give you what you want. So I think maybe we need time for that to play out, and for you keep demanding the things you want to demand, and stressing the legitimacy for that, but more so dealing with some of the things you can deal with as you wait for that recognition. I think the more you do, the more you achieve, the progress you make, in the end translates into changing people's minds that have not given you what you want.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for the valuable time you gave us from your schedule.
Perfect.
And we learned a lot. It was very valuable learning and insights from this session. So on behalf of the students, we'd like to thank you very much. And,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we might take a picture with you if you don't mind. Yes, thank you very much. Let's group here, over here. Take a group picture. Thank you.